never be destroyed. Fib or fact? When you look at the Bible, there is a grand narrative that includes Israel and the Jewish people pretty early on. As a matter of fact, the first book of the Bible, Bereshit, Genesis, has 50 chapters. Out of 50 chapters, 11 of them described mankind in general, and 39 of them, the rest of the book, up to chapter 50, give us details about the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and the whole story of the Jewish people. The very first chapter of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, to speak of the Jewish people or to start the narrative about the Jewish people is chapter 12 of Genesis. And the first 3 verses of that chapter establish what we know later as the Abrahamic Covenant. At that place, it's only a promise between God that God makes to Abraham and his descendants. But it becomes a covenant within a few chapters in chapter 15 of Genesis. What's critical to understand is that verse 3 of the very first chapter, speaking of Israel and the Jewish people, in the whole Bible, establishes the blessing and cursing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. So there is what some call the Genesis 12:3 or 12:1 through 3 is God's relationship to Israel, or God's foreign policy when it comes to Israel. Right there at the very beginning of the narrative about Israel and the Jewish people. You bless or you curse. There's no third option. You do one, you don't do the other one by default. But if you don't, you either bless or you curse. Yeah, you cannot sit on the fence. Even more than that, if you curse, something really dramatic takes place. If you look at Psalm 83, verse 1 through 5, it talks, Asaph is pleading with God. He's talking with God. He says, please do something about the enemies of Israel who want to have all of Israel destroyed. And there's this verse 5. It says, they have made a covenant. Against you, they make a covenant. So here we have, even one step further. When the enemies of Israel convene or agree to destroy Israel, and being back then or today, then when they agree to destroy Israel, they're actually making a covenant against the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So you cannot be a believer in good standing and say that you love God, and in the same breath say that Israel is the problem. If that's what you're saying, then you are not in the will of God. It's that simple. But then, that does not tell us, is Israel still going to exist forever? Well, there is a verse, there's more than one, but there's a passage in Jeremiah 31, 35 through 37, that tells us about the beginning of chapter, parts of chapter 31 tell us about the new covenant that God will make with the house of Israel and the house of Judah. But it also tells us that the Lord will never allow for Israel to be destroyed. If you can destroy the stars and the moon and the sun and measure the earth, and count the stars, which is impossible to do. It is God's way, tongue-in-cheek, to say, no way, Jose, I'm not allowing for Israel to be destroyed. Well, can there be casualties? Well, we've seen casualties. We've seen over the centuries and the millennia, all the Jewish people that were killed. We've seen the Holocaust. We see what's happening in Israel today. We see the rebirth of antisemitism. So there's always going to be casualties, but there's also always going to be the friends of Israel, the Christians, the believers like you, who will do anything to support Israel, to pray for Israel, and to come to the rescue of the Jewish people who need help. So, from a biblical standpoint, while there might be casualties, and there will be a lot more casualties in what we call the 7-year tribulation, when we say Israel will never be destroyed, fib or fact? Well, my friend, I can tell you from a biblical standpoint, Israel will never be destroyed is a fact. It's a biblical fact. Until next time, be blessed.